There you are. The anomaly they swore didn't exist. The glitch in their doctrine. The quiet storm they thought they could predict. Until you shifted. You felt it too, didn't you? That moment the air changed. When your pulse stopped matching the rhythm of ordinary people and synced with something older, darker, closer to truth. The moment you unlocked a mode nobody's ever seen, and every veteran within reach felt their chest tighten, like they'd been outclassed by a ghost they can't track. They're whispering about you now, not in locker rooms, not in strategy calls, in confession tones, because they know what they're seeing doesn't belong in the categories they memorized. It doesn't match patterns they studied. It doesn't obey rules they worshipped. You broke their entire map, and you didn't even flinch. See, here's the funny little secret, sugar. People train for decades, bleeding, kneeling, begging for mastery. But you walked into the arena and evolved like evolution itself was your personal pet. You didn't climb a ladder. You snapped reality and skipped the tutorial, and that right there is why they're terrified to even stand beside you now. Because what are they supposed to do when someone with no roadmap suddenly becomes the new standard? What are they supposed to believe when a person who shouldn't exist walks in and rewrites the ceiling as a floor? What are they supposed to tell themselves when the mode you just activated exposes every limit they thought was strength? They thought experience made them untouchable. They thought longevity equaled supremacy. They thought endurance meant dominance. But then you showed up. Angel on one shoulder, demon on the other, saint in your intentions, psychopath in your execution. And you forced them to confront a truth they've avoided for years. You are what happens when pain doesn't break someone. It optimizes them. Look at you, walking paradox. Light sharp enough to blind. Darkness precise enough to guide. A blueprint that builds itself and demolishes itself in the same breath. You didn't learn their rules. You became their exception. Do you understand how frightening that is? You unlocked a mode of awareness, instinct, flow that cannot be trained. It cannot be replicated. It cannot be purchased in mentorship. It cannot be awarded through rank. It is something else, something evolutionary, something cosmic, something that makes seasoned warriors question whether everything they've done their entire lives amounts to anything anymore. They've got medals on their walls. You've got destiny in your bloodstream. They've got protocols. You've got intuition that cuts deeper than doctrine. They've got years of repetition. You've got a moment of awakening that outran their whole careers. And the craziest part? You didn't ask for this. You didn't audition for their approval. You didn't kneel for their recognition. You unlocked this mode because the universe got tired. Tired of waiting for someone ruthless enough, gentle enough, broken enough, reborn enough to carry what others dropped. You are the contradiction that terrifies tradition, the riddle that erases experts, the evolution that invalidates old hierarchies. They used to ask each other, who's the strongest? Who's the fastest? Who's the most experienced? Now they ask a new question, quietly, nervously, like children huddled near a door they don't want to open. Who the hell is that? Because every veteran in the room felt it. The moment you stepped forward, the ground didn't shake. They did. Their instincts, once razor sharp, dulled in your presence. Their knowledge, once sacred, became irrelevant at your feet. Their confidence, once unshakable, cracked like old armor. You didn't overpower them. You didn't outsmart them. You out-evolved them. That mode you unlocked, it wasn't power, it was permission. Permission to become everything they feared you might be, and everything you refused to suppress. The mode where your shadow thinks faster than their strategy. The mode where your silence speaks louder than their resumes. The mode where your energy alone performs a psychological autopsy on every lie they tell themselves. You are not competing with them. You are ending the era they belonged to. And deep down, they know it. That's why they stare. That's why they study you. That's why they fall silent when you enter. As if the room itself respects whatever the hell you've become. You didn't become better, you became beyond. And once you cross that threshold, darling, there's no going back. Not for you, not for them, not for the world that now has to adjust to your impossible existence. So walk forward, not like a challenger, like the new constant. They spent decades sharpening themselves. You spent moments awakening. And somehow, the moment won. You unlocked a mode nobody's ever seen. Now watch, as the veterans who once trained others scramble to understand the creature who trained himself in silence, in chaos, in pain, in rebirth. Go on. Keep moving. Let them question their entire careers, because they should. You didn't just rewrite the game. You became the reason it has to evolve. There it is, that shift again. The one you pretend not to notice, even though it rearranges the entire room like gravity itself is choosing sides. You think I don't see it dripping off you? That quiet, lethal awareness. That mode you unlocked that nobody has a name for yet. Trust me, they feel it too. Especially the veterans. The ones who thought they were carved from unshakable stone. The ones who built their egos on decades of experience, rituals, ranks, scars, medals, doctrines. And then you arrived. Not loud, not dramatic. Just different. Different in a way that makes them uncomfortable in their own skin. Different in a way that makes competence look outdated. Different in a way that makes wisdom look slow. They spent years building themselves. You spent years surviving yourself. And survival builds a type of intelligence no classroom, no training manual, no grizzled veteran can replicate. You don't fight like them. You don't learn like them. You don't rise like them. You transcend. And transcending is always more terrifying than winning. Because winning requires strategy. Transcending requires becoming something unrecognizable. Look at them, the veterans who used to walk with certainty. Their steps are smaller now. Their confidence flickers. Their voice is lower when you pass by, not out of respect, out of existential confusion. They're asking questions no warrior wants to ask. If he can do that, what does that make everything I spent decades perfecting? If he unlocked that mode by accident, what happens when he learns to control it? If this is who he is now, what the hell will he become tomorrow? You see, darling, the danger wasn't that you surpassed them. People surpass each other all the time. The danger is that you surpassed the idea of them. They're not comparing themselves to you anymore. They're comparing themselves to the version of you that hasn't even arrived yet. Do you realize how psychologically devastating that is? They're fighting who you were yesterday, while you're already negotiating with who you might become tonight. You have an evolving edge, a living advantage, a mind that mutates under pressure instead of collapsing. Where they hit walls, you open doors. Where they hesitate, you accelerate. Where they follow, you improvise. And improvisation terrifies the experienced more than failure ever will. Veterans can handle losing. They've lost before. They've bled before. They've rebuilt themselves countless times. But they cannot handle being made irrelevant. And that's what your new mode does. Quietly, ruthlessly, elegantly, It makes them wonder if the mountain they spent their lives climbing wasn't even the right mountain. Because here you come, walking in from a direction they never considered, breathing in a rhythm they don't understand, moving like your body is remembering something theirs forgot long ago. You're not a prodigy, you're not gifted, you're not chosen. You are the result of conditions too violent to articulate, too painful to romanticize, too sacred to cheapen. You are what happens when a soul refuses to break and instead begins reconfiguring itself. And that reconfiguration, that's what they're seeing. That's what's shaking them. That's what keeps them awake at night. Because they know, whether they admit it or not, that you've entered a mode where your intuition beats their strategy. Your instinct outruns their expertise. Your silence overshadows their speeches. Your uncertainty outpowers their confidence. You are unpredictable in a world that worships predictability. You are evolving in a world that fears transformation. You are accelerating in a world that moves only when instructed. They don't know how to categorize you, and humans fear what they cannot categorize. Are you a saint, a psychopath, a savior, a problem, a blessing, a threat? The truth is beautifully cruel. You're all of them, at once, on command, without warning. Your darkness isn't poison, it's precision. Your light isn't purity, it's camouflage. Your pain isn't weakness, it's propulsion. And now that you've unlocked this unnamed mode, you're no longer playing the game with them. You're playing the game with reality itself. You bend expectations. You warp tension. You manipulate atmosphere. You shift emotional climates like weather. People like you don't just enter a room. They alter its physics, and the veterans know it. That's why they step softer. That's why they breathe slower. That's why they recalibrate their entire worldview the moment you appear. Because deep down, under the accolades, under the pride, under the armor, they recognize the truth. You are the future version of everything they tried to become. A prototype of a new kind of being. A blueprint written in shadows and revelations. A threat, a miracle, a mutation, a prophecy wearing skin. And no resume on earth can prepare anyone for someone who evolves by existing. So go on. Keep unlocking modes no one has language for. Keep making seasoned experts question their purpose. Keep forcing entire systems to update themselves just to withstand your presence. Because you didn't come to compete. You came to redefine what's possible. And it's already too late for them to look away. You're the glitch they prayed wouldn't spread. The evolution they feared would arrive. The living reminder that everything they know can be undone by someone who survived enough pain to create a new form of intelligence. Let them question their careers. Let them question their past. Let them question their entire identity. Because the truth is, darling, you didn't unlock a mode. You unlocked yourself. And the world has no defense for that. You feel that, don't you? That pressure building behind your ribs the longer you stay awake. That sensation like something ancient is trying to stand upright inside you, stretching its fingers, testing its limits, adjusting to its new vessel. Most people call that anxiety. That's just your next evolution booting up. And that's what terrifies them the most. Because you didn't unlock a new mode like it was some power-up in a video game. You shifted species in real time. You stepped out of the blueprint they all studied and became a prototype they can't reverse engineer. The veterans are watching you with the kind of fear only people who've mastered everything can feel. The fear of witnessing something they can't master back. Every instinct in their body tells them you're not talented. you're inevitable. A phenomenon that didn't ask for permission, because evolution never does. And you didn't climb through their hierarchy. You snuck beneath it, behind it, within it, and woke up above it. Tell me, do you know what that does to a person who spent 30 years believing they were on top? They unravel quietly, silently, politely, like a building whose foundation is dissolving in the rain while everyone inside pretends the floor isn't tilting. Veterans aren't scared of losing. They're scared of becoming obsolete. And when you activated that mode, the one nobody can teach, nobody can name, nobody can map, you forced them to confront the nightmare buried deepest in their chests. Everything I know might not matter anymore. You didn't beat them, you unmade their logic, their wisdom, you bypassed it, their experience, you overshadowed it, their certainty, you shattered it without even aiming. Because here's your real advantage, the one you never speak out loud. Where they built identity through repetition, you built identity through rupture. Every break you survived upgraded your mind. Every betrayal recalibrated your perception. Every loss rewired your instincts. Most people evolve from comfort. You evolved from catastrophe. And catastrophe creates a brand of intelligence that traditional training can't even simulate. You don't just see threats. You feel trajectories. You don't just analyze people. You enter their patterns. You don't just react to energy. You manipulate it like tension is clay in your hands. Your presence alone forces recalculation. Your silence alone reads like strategy. Your unpredictability alone rewrites the hierarchy. They keep asking each other, what is he on? What is he doing? How did he learn that? But the truth is the punchline they don't want to accept. You didn't learn it. You became it. Every version of you that was supposed to die. The soft one, the innocent one, the obedient one, the predictable one. Each of them handed you a piece of intelligence before they disappeared. That's why your mode feels supernatural to them. It's not supernatural. It's condensed survival. Survival compounded until it became vision. Vision compressed until it became instinct. Instinct sharpened until it became prophecy. And prophecy wearing human skin is enough to send veterans into existential spirals. You know what I love the most, though? You didn't even unlock this mode for them. You didn't do it to prove anything. You didn't do it to compete. You did it because your body finally stopped pretending to be small enough to fit their expectations. You outgrew their scale, and now they're left dealing with the consequences. The consequences of someone who moved from potential to inevitability. Look at them when you walk past. Their eyes don't follow you. Their souls do. They're measuring, calculating, comparing. But the problem is, you're not comparable. You're not measurable. You're not within the equations they memorized. You're the variable that changes the entire equation by existing. And deep down, beneath their pride, beneath their training, beneath their decades of self-mythology, they know the truth. You are the one they weren't prepared for. You are the one they can't predict. You are the one they can't surpass. Because you didn't get better. You mutated. You didn't find your power. You became the phenomenon their power warns them about. That mode you activated, the one that makes seasoned warriors rethink their entire career, isn't a phase. It's your baseline now. A new operating system, a new psychological architecture, a new identity forged in the collision between who you were supposed to be and who you refused to become. And here's the part that twists the knife deeper. You're still holding back. They're terrified of what you are now. They have no idea what you can be when you stop restraining yourself to make others comfortable. So keep going, keep unlocking, keep shifting, keep terrifying the ones who thought they had seen every type of threat. Because you're not a threat, you're a timeline correction. The universe didn't give you a new mode. It simply removed the limiters that were insulting your potential. Go on. Walk into your next evolution. Let the veterans tremble, wonder, question their entire identity. Because they should. You're not here to fit into their history. You're here to make them footnotes in yours. Strange, isn't it? How the room feels heavier the longer you stand in it. Not because you're loud, not because you're trying, but because the gravity around you changed. People think gravity comes from mass, but in reality, it comes from meaning, from presence, from the kind of psychological weight only someone forged in fire can carry. That's what they're reacting to. That's why their pulse stutters when you enter. That's why their confidence drains like sand through cracked fingers. You didn't just unlock a new mode. You unlocked a new atmosphere, and everyone else is suffocating in it. The veterans, especially, they can't explain it, but their bodies know. Their instincts know. Their bones know. Something about you is off, advanced, unmapped, uncomfortable. They've spent their lives fighting enemies they could categorize. But how do you fight someone who doesn't fit into any category? You're not the strongest. You're not the fastest. You're not the loudest. You're not even the most experienced. You are simply the most evolved. And evolution doesn't need to brag. It just arrives. And everything older has to adjust or die. Look at them. The veterans who once strutted through the building like they invented discipline. Their posture softens when you're near. Their language becomes careful. Their jokes quiet down, not out of fear of you harming them, but fear of you exposing them. Because your presence alone reveals what they've been hiding behind. Habit, reputation, routine, momentum, echoes of past victories. But you operate from something far more lethal, truth. The truth of who you've become, the truth of what you survived, the truth of what your mind can do under pressure. You move like someone who died once and came back with the cheat codes. You think like someone who's seen behind the curtain and refused to look away. You listen like someone who recognizes patterns before they form. That's the mode you unlocked. A mode forged by pain, sharpened by silence and crowned by awakening. A mode where your darkness upgrades you. Your light blinds your enemies. Your contradictions harmonize. Your wounds become weapons. Your instincts become oracle-level precise. They don't have that. They can't train for that. They can't earn that. That's why they're spiraling, because veterans live off stability, off predictability, off knowing they've seen it all. And then this anomaly, wrapped in skin, wandered into their field of vision and broke their entire worldview with a single shift. You know how insane that is. You didn't just surpass them. You forced them to confront that the world might be changing, and they're not built for the new version of it. They thought the hierarchy was permanent. They thought their experience guaranteed relevance. They thought their reputation insulated them from being overshadowed. But evolution is rude like that. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't care who was here first. It doesn't care how long they trained. It only cares who adapts. And you didn't adapt. You transcended. That's why they stare. That's why they whisper. That's why they keep repeating your name, like it's some classified warning. He's different. He's unpredictable. He's not like the others. He learns too fast. He doesn't break. He doesn't follow the emotional patterns we expect. Of course you don't. You outgrew those patterns years ago. Pain rewrote your brain. Silence rewrote your identity. Pressure rewrote your reflexes. Loss rewrote your emotional hardware. And what walked out of that process wasn't a person. It was a phenomenon. That's what they're sensing. That's why everything feels off when you're around. You're not playing the same game. You're not living in the same psychological dimension. You're not using the same operating system. They study you like an equation, missing half its variables. They observe you like a creature they've never documented before. They talk about you like a case study none of them feel qualified to analyze. Hey, you! Stop. Yeah, right there. That uneasy silence you just felt. That's the sound of the world realizing it can't explain you. 8 billion people walking around with opinions, theories, hot takes, think pieces, degrees, algorithms, gods, demons, scientists, prophets, and not a single one of them can explain why your moves keep coming true. They replay it in slow motion. They freeze the frame. They zoom in. They run it backward. They whisper to each other like they're afraid reality might overhear. And still, no answer. Because what you're doing isn't prediction. It's alignment. And that terrifies them. You see, normal people guess. They hope. They pray. They manifest like beggars shaking a cup at the universe. But you move like someone who already saw the ending and got bored waiting for it. You don't ask if something will work. You already felt it lock into place before you touched it. And when it hits exactly the way you knew it would, they call it luck, coincidence, timing, anything except the truth, because the truth would mean the system isn't closed. And you slipped through a crack they didn't even know existed. They don't understand how someone can look calm while the future rearranges itself around them. They don't understand how you can smile softly and still move like a loaded weapon. They don't understand how you can hold mercy in one hand and inevitability in the other, saint in posture, psychopath in precision, angel in restraint, demon in execution. That contradiction fries their circuits because they were taught you're supposed to be one thing at a time. You broke that rule early, and you paid for it in pain. That pain. That wasn't punishment. That was calibration. Every betrayal tuned your instincts sharper. Every loss stripped the noise away. Every night you stared at the ceiling wondering if you were broken. Nah. You were being refined. While they were learning how to fit in, you were learning how to see patterns under patterns, how to feel momentum before it becomes motion, how to sense when the timeline is about to bend and step into the bend instead of resisting it. That's why your moves land before the crowd even understands the game has started. They call you unpredictable because you don't repeat yourself. You evolve. You don't move on schedules that can be studied. You don't telegraph your intentions for validation. You don't announce the storm. You become atmospheric pressure. By the time they realize something changed, it's already too late to stop it. And what really messes with them is this. You're not frantic about it. You're not manic. You're not desperate. You're disturbingly composed, like you trust something deeper than logic to carry you. That's because you do. There's a quiet place inside you where outcomes are decided before words exist. A place that doesn't argue, doesn't doubt, doesn't negotiate. When you listen to that place, things line up. When you act from it, reality responds like it recognizes authority. And the world hates that, not because it's evil, but because it's uncontrollable. You can't be boxed. You can't be predicted. You can't be managed by averages, trends, or mass psychology. 8 billion people thinking the same way still can't corner one person who learned how to think alone. They tried to label you genius, crazy, dangerous, blessed, cursed. They rotated the words like keys that didn't fit the lock. Because the truth is uglier and more beautiful than labels. You're someone who survived the kind of pressure that breaks others into obedience. You didn't become softer, you became clearer. And clarity is lethal to illusions. That's why when you move, things happen, not magically, inevitably. You don't force outcomes. You remove resistance, you don't chase. You position, you don't fight chaos. You weaponize it. While everyone else is reacting emotionally to what just happened, you're already adjusting for what's about to happen next. That's why your luck looks offensive. That's why your calm feels disrespectful. That's why people get uneasy around you without knowing why. Because on some animal level, they sense you're not guessing. You're confirming. And here's the part they really can't stand. You didn't steal this ability. You earned it through isolation, through being misunderstood, through holding your tongue when screaming would have been easier, through choosing patience when revenge was available, through becoming fluent in silence. The world didn't give you permission to evolve. You did it anyway. And now the same world is watching you like you're a glitch it can't patch. Every time you're right again, something inside them cracks. Every time your move lands clean, their confidence in randomness dies a little more. Because if you're not guessing, then maybe reality isn't random. And if reality isn't random, then power doesn't belong to crowds. It belongs to those who can read the current and step at the exact moment it shifts. That's you. Not because you're loud, not because you're cruel, but because you're aligned. You became unpredictable by becoming honest with yourself. You became dangerous by mastering restraint. You became powerful by walking through pain without letting it turn you stupid. And now your presence alone bends rooms. Your silence makes people talk too much. Your moves echo before they land, and when they hit, the world acts shocked, like it didn't feel you coming. 8 billion people can't explain it. Good. Let them argue, let them theorize, let them panic scroll and overanalyze and whisper your name like it's a question mark. You don't owe reality an explanation. You're not here to be understood. You're here to move, clean, precise, inevitable, and let the truth reveal itself in outcomes they can't deny. Because the scariest thing in the world isn't chaos. It's someone who knows exactly when to step, and does. And the longer this keeps happening, the more uncomfortable it gets for them. Because patterns are supposed to belong to institutions, not individuals. Forecasting is supposed to require teams, data centers, permission slips from reality itself. But you keep doing it alone, quietly, almost casually, like you're not even impressed anymore. And that's the part that makes their stomach drop. Because obsession still hasn't touched you. Ego hasn't poisoned it. Fear hasn't hijacked it. You're steady, focused, detached in the most dangerous way possible. They keep asking the wrong question. They ask how you knew. They ask why you were right again. They ask what information you had access to. But the real question, the one they're too afraid to ask, is what did you become to move like this? Because no amount of surface-level intelligence explains someone who can walk into uncertainty and come out holding the exact outcome they envisioned without shaking. That kind of accuracy only comes from integration, from making peace with both sides of yourself, instead of pretending one doesn't exist. You didn't amputate the dark to look holy. You didn't abandon the light to look strong. You fused them. You learned when to soften and when to sharpen, when to wait and when to cut clean. You understood that mercy without power is useless, and power without mercy is sloppy. So you became precise, surgical, almost invisible until the moment impact is unavoidable. That's why people feel like you always knew. Because on some level, you did. Not in words, not in predictions shouted from rooftops. You felt it in your body before the mind caught up. A tightening here, a stillness there, a sense that now is not the moment. And then suddenly, now is the only moment. You trust that instinct because you forged it in fire. Because you ignored it once and paid dearly. Because pain taught you to listen when logic hesitates. They don't see that part. They just see outcomes. They see you step left while everyone runs right. They see you go quiet while others panic post. They see you invest when it looks insane and pull back when it looks safe. And when the dust settles, your position makes sense in hindsight, which is exactly how inevitability disguises itself. It always looks obvious after, never before. That's why they accuse you of manipulation, because if it's not luck and it's not coincidence, then it must be control. And the idea that someone could move with this much accuracy without forcing anything threatens the core myth they live by, that they're at the mercy of randomness. You expose a different truth, that randomness only punishes the unaligned, that chaos favors those who can dance with it instead of begging it to stop. You don't dominate rooms by volume, you dominate them by gravity. People adjust themselves around you without realizing why. Conversations tilt, decisions slow down, eyes linger longer than they should, because some part of them senses you're operating on a different clock, like you're slightly ahead of the frame rate of normal life. And that creates discomfort, not because you're aggressive, but because you're undeniable. And the wildest part? You're still evolving. Most people plateau the moment something works. They cling to the version of themselves that finally got results. You don't. The second something becomes predictable, you let it die. You don't worship your past wins. You harvest the lesson and move on. That's why no one can pin you down. They're studying a version of you that no longer exists, while you're already 2 iterations ahead, shedding skins they haven't even noticed yet. This isn't arrogance, it's survival. You learned early that stagnation is just a slower form of death. So you keep sharpening, refining, letting go, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because pain stopped scaring you the moment you realized it was information. Feedback. A signal telling you where the edge is and how to step past it next time. So when your moves keep coming true, it's not because you're special in the way fairy tales mean it. It's because you paid attention when others numbed themselves. You stayed awake when comfort tried to sedate you. You refused to lie to yourself just to belong. And that honesty, brutal, unfiltered, sometimes lonely honesty, gave you access to something most people never touch: internal coherence. When your thoughts, instincts, values, and actions point in the same direction, reality responds differently. Doors don't just open, they swing because you're already moving through them. Obstacles don't disappear. They reveal themselves early enough to step around. And timing stops feeling like chance and starts feeling like recognition. Like the moment nods at you and says, now. 8 billion people can't explain it because explanation requires distance. And you're too close to the source. You're not watching the current. You're in it, feeling its pull, adjusting your posture, letting it carry you where force never could. And that's why the world keeps blinking in disbelief every time you land on your feet again. Let them doubt. Let them speculate. Let them argue in circles, trying to reduce you to something safe and understandable. You don't need their language to validate your movement. The outcomes speak fluently enough. Every aligned step rewrites the room. Every accurate move fractures another illusion, and every time reality bends, instead of resisting you, the truth gets louder. You're not guessing anymore. You're remembering. And once that remembering locks in, something irreversible happens inside you. You stop negotiating with doubt. You stop asking the room for permission. You stop explaining yourself to people who can't even explain their own fear. Your nervous system settles into a new baseline. Calm, alert, lethal in its clarity. You're no longer reacting to life. You're moving with it, like you finally learned the rhythm everyone else keeps tripping over. That's why setbacks don't derail you anymore. They don't shock you. They don't send you spiraling into meaninglessness. When something collapses, you don't ask, "Why me?" You ask, "What did this just reveal?" Because you know every fracture exposes structure, every loss highlights a dependency that needed to die. Every delay sharpens timing. Pain stopped being an enemy the moment you realized it was a translator, converting chaos into usable information. People mistake your composure for coldness. They think you don't feel. They have no idea how much you feel, how deeply, how intensely, how dangerously. The difference is you don't leak it everywhere. You don't let emotion drive the wheel while logic sleeps in the trunk. You let emotion inform you, then you choose. That's the discipline they don't see. That's the part they can't copy. Because discipline born from suffering isn't performative. It's embedded. You walk into rooms carrying both empathy and consequence. You can read weakness without exploiting it, and that alone makes you terrifying. Because it proves you're not acting out of compulsion. You're acting out of choice. And choice is what separates a monster from a weapon. One is sloppy, the other is precise. You learned to be precise because you had to survive your own mind when no one else could hold it steady for you. So when your moves keep coming true, it's not because you're chasing certainty. It's because you've made peace with uncertainty. You don't need guarantees. You don't need applause. You don't need the crowd to clap before you step forward. You move first. You let reality catch up. And when it does, it looks like prophecy to people who are still waiting for signs. They don't understand how you can sit quietly while everything is about to change. How you can pause at the edge and feel no panic. That stillness isn't emptiness. It's compression, a coiled spring, a gathered storm. You learn the hard way that rushing leaks power, that announcing drains impact, that silence sharpens intention until the moment arrives fully formed, undeniable, unavoidable. And when that moment hits, you don't hesitate. That's the other thing they can't explain. Most people freeze right before execution. You don't. Because you've already lived with the consequences in your mind. You've already accepted the cost. You've already mourned the version of yourself that won't exist afterward. So when it's time, there's nothing left to argue with. The move happens clean, surgical, final. They call it confidence, but that's too small a word. It's certainty without arrogance. It's humility paired with backbone. It's knowing you can be wrong and still move forward anyway. Because you don't cling to being right, you cling to being aligned. If alignment requires adjustment, you adjust. If it requires destruction, you don't flinch. You're loyal to truth, not comfort. That's why your presence disrupts systems. You don't fit into narratives designed to manage behavior. You don't respond to guilt the way you're supposed to. You don't fear shame the way they expect. You don't chase approval like currency. You've seen too much to trade your center for acceptance, and that makes you uncontrollable in a world built on leverage. 8 billion people trying to name what you're doing will still miss it because names reduce things, and you're not reduced anymore. You're integrated. The parts of you that once fought each other now move as one. The light doesn't deny the dark doesn't consume the light. They orbit each other, balanced, dangerous, complete. That internal ceasefire is what gives you velocity. No internal war means no wasted energy. So when the next move lands, and it will, they'll react the same way. Shock, denial, revision. They'll pretend they saw it coming. They'll rewrite history to protect their egos. They'll say it was obvious, and you'll just keep moving, already gone, already adapting, already preparing for a future they haven't emotionally caught up to yet. You don't need them to understand. Understanding is slow. Results are instant. Reality doesn't debate. It responds. And it keeps responding to you because you learned how to listen when everything else was screaming. Because you chose coherence over comfort. Because you endured the quiet, brutal process of becoming someone whose moves don't beg the universe. They inform it. So let the world keep asking questions it can't answer. Let 8 billion minds spin themselves dizzy, trying to reduce you to a headline, a theory, a cautionary tale. You're not here to be summarized. You're here to move with precision, to evolve without apology, to let truth arrive through action instead of explanation. Your moves keep coming true because you stopped lying to yourself, because you stopped fracturing your energy, because you became someone reality recognizes, and once that happens, there's no going back. And here's the part nobody wants to admit out loud. The moment you crossed that line, the world stopped treating you like a participant and started treating you like a variable. Not a pawn, not a spectator, a variable. Something that shifts equations just by entering the frame. That's why things accelerate around you now. That's why timelines collapse. That's why people feel like events are speeding up whenever you get involved. You're not rushing life. You're removing friction. You can feel it, can't you? That strange sense that time bends slightly when you commit. That decisions stack faster. That consequences arrive cleaner. That doors don't creak open anymore. They snap. And when something resists, it doesn't linger. It either breaks or reveals itself as irrelevant. That's not chaos. That's efficiency. That's what happens when someone stops living in fragments. Most people are split down the middle, arguing with themselves every step of the way. Half of them wants safety. Half of them wants power. Half of them wants love. Half of them wants revenge. They cancel themselves out before they even move. You don't. You unified. You accepted that you're capable of tenderness and destruction, patience and precision, forgiveness and finality. Once you stopped pretending otherwise, the static vanished. That's why your intuition feels illegal to them. Because intuition that accurate threatens entire belief systems. It threatens the idea that suffering is random. It threatens the idea that power must be granted from above. It threatens the idea that awareness is harmless. You're proof that awareness sharpens into influence when paired with discipline. And discipline scares people more than aggression ever could. They can handle anger. They can manage rebellion. They can predict desperation. But they don't know what to do with someone who's calm, focused, and internally aligned. Someone who doesn't rush. Someone who doesn't overshare. Someone who doesn't flinch when the stakes rise. Someone who doesn't need to dominate conversations because the outcome will do the talking. That's you now. And don't think this went unnoticed. Subconsciously, people start deferring to you before they understand why. They ask your opinion and then surprise themselves by following it. They hesitate before crossing you. Not because you're threatening, but because something in them says, "This person sees farther than I do." That instinct is ancient, older than language, older than rules. It's the same instinct that once told humans who to follow into the dark. You didn't seek that role. You earned it by surviving the dark alone. That's why your confidence doesn't wobble when things go quiet. Silence doesn't scare you. You've lived there. You've made decisions there. You've rebuilt yourself there. While others panic in the absence of feedback, you sharpen. While others spiral, when attention fades, you recalibrate. You know that silence isn't emptiness. It's a staging ground.